This is Professor Rich for TYT Nation. About a week ago, Steve O had asked us to send in I am Trayvon Martin videos dealing with ways we've seen racial discrimination in day-to-day life. And mine's not exciting like Steve O's. It doesn't have any guns or anything dramatic like that, but I think it's illuminating. Now, obviously, I myself haven't received a lot of racial discrimination down here in Texas because I'm a white guy. But in 1996, I was working in a kind of a fancy barbecue restaurant here in Austin, Texas, and it was in one of the nicest parts of town. And one day my car was broken. I asked a good friend of mine to give me a ride home. Now, he's a Jamaican guy, and he was black. And he said, okay. And so the shift ends, and we leave the restaurant. Now, I'd been driving home down that road for, at that point, I guess 5 years, and I rarely ever saw cops, and they certainly didn't mess with me. But we don't get a quarter of a mile out past the restaurant until a cop shows up behind us, starts following us. And I notice it, and I think it's probably just a coincidence. And then about 30 seconds later, a cop shows up to the side of us. And maybe a minute after that, a third cop shows up. They follow us all the way through that part of town. And I'm kind of freaking out, and I turn to my friend, and I go, hey, man, what's going on? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, there's cops following us. And he says, oh, this happens every night when I drive home. And that was really kind of a shocking moment for me when I began to realize that the world was not the same for him as it was for me. Years later, when I had become a teacher, we were talking about the Fourth Amendment and illegal search and seizure, probable cause, those sorts of issues. We were talking about traffic stops. And there was maybe 12 to 15 black kids in the classroom. And I came to realize through the course of the conversation that never in my life had I been pulled over or been in a car where anybody had been pulled over and had the police ask for everybody's license in the car. And I realized that of the 12 to 15 black kids in there, none of them had ever been pulled over and have the police not ask to run everybody's license in the car. And that was a really interesting baseline assumption. You know, apparently, the police in Austin at that time, you pull over a car with black people in it, you run everybody's license, you pull over a car with white people in it, you assume they're okay. Now, the final thing is an idea I have on why the conservatives are having such a difficult time with the Trayvon Martin case. And it's what I call the gun fantasy. Now, this isn't something I made up. I live in Texas. I know lots of people who really like guns. And they all talk a lot about this idea that somebody at some point is going to break into their house. And then they're going to use the gun to protect them. And that's the gun fantasy. Somebody's going to come after you or the people you love or maybe your neighbors. And you're going to save the day by shooting the bad person. Now, this is a broad phenomenon in our society. I can kind of trace it back to the 1960s, although it may go back much further than that, I'm sure it does, with the whole law and order movement, which was the idea that we needed to enforce law and order, which was a response to the rights of the accused movement with the Supreme Court decisions in that time, as well as the rise in black social unrest. And if you look back in the 1960s at things like Charles Bronson movies, things like Death Wish, or maybe Walking Tall, you can see this kind of played out where this guy goes and he gets a gun and he goes out to defend his neighborhood. And they're presented as very heroic. And I think for conservatives, the Trayvon Martin case is the gun fantasy gone terribly wrong. And I want to make it clear, I don't think everybody who has interest in guns thinks this way. And I certainly don't think all conservatives think this way. But I do think it exists. And in the Trayvon Martin case, George Zimmerman drove around, apparently most nights, with a gun, waiting to see that dangerous person so he could take him out. And certainly he thought that he was going to become a hero by doing this. And of course, when he saw Trayvon Martin, his fantasy was coming true. But then it all went horribly wrong. And I think that that's one of the issues here, is that conservatives, not all of them, but some of them are seeing this themselves a little bit in the George Zimmerman case. Not to say that they're necessarily racist or they're going to kill anybody, but they have always thought of this scenario where the scary person comes along and then they save the day. And just to be fair, liberals have their own deranged fantasies, and I certainly have my own share that taint my thinking. But one example would be what I call the blind side fantasy, the idea that particularly the white liberal is going to go along and uplift and kind of save the minority that needs help, the old white man's burden thing. So I don't mean to be too harsh on conservatives. I'm sure they're not going to like this very much. But I do think that helps explain why maybe Nancy Grace realized that if she supported Trayvon, she was going to upset a lot of conservatives because her job is to sell fear, right? That's what she does for a living. She tries to freak people out. But if she supported George Zimmerman, she was going to upset a lot of her kind of middle-aged women audience who weren't as comfortable with this. And I think that's why conservatives are having such a hard time talking about this case in a way that makes a whole lot of sense to us anyway. Thanks for listening.